Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Murdoch Riley, the principal investigator of the CTSA and the director of the Irving Institute. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here to celebrate the renewal of the CTSA, to remind you of who we are and what we do at the Irving Institute, and to present to you some of our plans for the next 5 years. Next slide, please. First, some housekeeping. We're delighted today to have Dr. Ruski provide some introductory remarks. That will be followed by Harold Pincus, my co-director, giving an overview of NCATS and what the CTSA program is about from a national perspective. And then I will give an overview of the Irving Institute and how we support researchers at Columbia. And we have specific deep dives for short sections on a precision medicine program with Wendy Chung, on our educational and training programs with Daichi Shimbo, and from our community engagement team, we'll present a video towards the end before we wrap up. Next slide, please. And just some housekeeping again. Please ask us questions in the question and answer feature of Zoom during the presentation. We have a team ready to answer those questions. We'll capture those questions. We'll answer those questions fully as an FAQ document, which will go on the website, as well as making this presentation available. And if there's some minutes left at the end, I'll address some of those questions, the big questions that come up. Next slides, please. Next slide, please. Again, it's a great pleasure to be here today and to celebrate the achievement of our teams, our collaborators, our outstanding researchers to do so well in the CTSA renewal. I'm very proud of Columbia in this moment. And I'd like to pass over to Dr. Ruski to provide some introductory remarks. Thank you, Anil.
Thanks so much, Dr. Riley and the group. I know I speak on behalf of many at Columbia University and beyond for heartfelt congratulations on all the hard work that went into the successful grant renewal by the Irving Institute to the CTSA on receiving not only a great score, but a perfect score from the study section. The Irving Institute and its CTSA program form a hub within the larger Columbia community, and its contributions to the strong research and educational missions of the university, and by extension to clinical and community programs as well. The Irving Institute collaborates with many partners and will continue to work closely with New York Presbyterian Hospital under the leadership of Drs. Corwin, Faris, and Hill, the New York State Psychiatric Institute, and many other community, state, and national collaborators. The Irving Institute, as we'll all hear shortly, for the next 5 years, will continue to emphasize and lead interdisciplinary initiatives locally and nationally to make translational and clinical research even more efficient and get more diagnostic and treatments to our patients even more quickly. I would like to conclude my initial remarks with a quotation provided by the Honorable U.S. Senator Charles Schumer of New York. Quote, "I am thankful the Columbia University Irving Institute, one of the nation's leading centers for clinical research, has received this well-deserved additional funding. The Institute has gained national recognition for its programs, and the grant will continue the Institute's missions to improve the health and well-being of our state's communities through innovations in clinical and translational science." End of quote. Again, congratulations. And Murdoch, special congratulations to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Let's put the slides back up again. So at this point, I'd like to pass over the baton to Dr. Harold Pincus, and he will address the issue of what is NCATS and what is the CTSA program. Thank you, Harold.
So can we have the next slide, please? So as you would expect from NIH speak, there are a lot of acronyms that we deal with. Our CTSA itself, which stands for Clinical and Translational Science Award, is actually a combination of 3 different funding mechanisms. A U grant that does support the central activities of the CTSA, and 2 training and career development grants, a TL1 and a KL2. NCAT stands for the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, which is part of NIH and is focused on overall translational research. There are several different components to NCATS, which includes a division of preclinical innovations and an intramural program that actually provides services to groups extramurally, as well as an Office of Rare Disease and an Office of Strategic Alliances that connects with the private sector and develops relationships with them. But we're under the auspice of the Division of Clinical Innovations. Next slide, please. We are also part of a national network of approximately 60 CTSAs. And you can see the relatively coastal distribution of the CTSAs. Now, there's some balance in there of so-called idea networks, which are aimed at stimulate research in regions with a lower concentration of NIH funding, typically more rural states. Actually, in the New York City area, or the New York regional area, we actually have developed a regional network of the 6 New York City CTSAs, plus the University of Rochester, SUNY Buffalo, Yale, and Rutgers, and with which we develop collaborative activities, and we have good relationships among them. Next slide. Now, the whole concept of translational research or translational science is all about understanding the scientific and operational principles, barriers, and strategies underlying each step of the translational process to stimulate the movement of innovations from so-called bench to bedside to community. But there's a lot of different ways by which this has been interpreted, with multiple different frameworks describing the different steps in the translational research model. And in fact, we've even developed our own 12-step translational phases. But next slide. To make it a bit more simple, there's basically this process, is that the process of bench to bedside to community typically takes decades, with 2 serious valleys of death. Number one is new discoveries don't necessarily lead to new treatments. According to NIH, 95% of the time, innovative findings either don't lead to newly developed potential treatments, or seemingly innovative treatments fail to or are delayed to demonstrate their effectiveness in clinical trials. Moreover, once there's actually a proven effective, innovative treatment or other intervention, it takes an estimated 17 years from the time that a clinical innovation has been proven effective to when it is provided routinely to patients. So the purpose of the CTSA program is to help traverse these valleys of death more quickly, helping researchers transition more efficiently through the continuum, developing new treatments more quickly and getting them into clinical practice much sooner. Next slide, please. So the NIH has sort of a framework that they've applied in thinking about all the different components of CTSAs and with it that would be involved with across the institution. And they laid out this so-called 3D framework of develop, demonstrate, and dissemination, which we have applied as the framework for our CTSA grant, which we've designed to, number one, develop creative strategies that address roadblocks to translation. Number two, demonstrate the effectiveness of the approaches that we've developed, actually conduct serious evaluations of them, and disseminate our learnings throughout our institutional and community partners, the CTSA network, and also the broader scientific community. Next slide, please. Importantly, the CTSA program and our CTSA is disease agnostic. That is, that the work cuts across all areas of human disease. The idea is to find innovative ways to speed these basic science findings to human application, conduct clinical trials to test their effectiveness, and study the best ways to disseminate and implement these findings and ultimately improve health in the community and the nation at large. Next slide. Beyond improving the translational process, a key question is who is going to do the translational work? And how do we instill these qualities that you see on the slide, in the next generation of researchers? So an important part of the CTSA is having a training program and career development programs that actually help to develop this new generation of translational researchers and prepare an interdisciplinary workforce that are fully integrated with the CTSA program. Next slide. So we've designed, and you'll see when Dr. Shimbo speaks a little bit later, that we've designed our programs to really be across the translational spectrum and to focus on broadly all of the disciplines that we encounter within Columbia, and also to do this in a developmental framework that goes from recruitment of people up through mentorship for both senior mentors as well as developing peer mentor programs. Next slide. So now Dr. Riley and other leaders of the Irving Institute will discuss the multiple components of the CTSA and how they can help Columbia researchers to move their science more quickly and successfully across this translational spectrum. Thanks.
Thanks, Charles. That was wonderful. First, I'll address that question of what is the Irving Institute and what do we do? And then I'll move on afterwards to kind of really talk about how we can support your research, how we do that now and how we will do it in the future. Next slide, please. So as Harold described, there's approximately 60 sites for CTSAs nationally called hubs. And the name of the hub at Columbia is the Irving Institute. And you will often know it as the Irving Institute or the CTSA or the CTSA and Irving Institute. And that's what we're commonly known as on campus, but that's our hub within the national framework. And we're here to support translational science across that spectrum, from basic science through that circular process right out to public health and beyond, across the T0 to T4 spectrum. Next slide, please. So we are available. We are also disease agnostic, as Sarah pointed out. We're interdisciplinary. We bring creative solutions and innovations. And again, we're available here to help you. So come back to this theme as we go through the talk later this morning. Next slide, please. Here I'll share the aims of the grant that we submitted last year. And we focused across the three aims in aim 1 to increase and to develop further innovations for both research itself and the process of research locally at the institution to help researchers. 2, we expand and plan to expand further the impact of these processes in our health system, in our local communities in a bidirectional manner and at the state level. And finally, we aim to disseminate and share these and to engage and lead nationally on translational innovations in science. And as Howard pointed out, each of these is developed within the framework of develop processes or research, demonstrate they're effective, and then disseminate or spread the word. Next slide, please. And this is pitched within a strategic vision or framework that's illustrated here. So you can see on the left with our partners locally, really to develop further our resources, our services, and our support for research at the local level. While that broken ring expands into local communities, is really about breaking down barriers and increasing our bidirectional activities through the health system, with our local communities and with the state, moving further with our regional partners, and ultimately to the national program and international impact. And you can see some examples of how we've done this with the learning health system, with our local hospital and healthcare partners, dissemination and implementation science, which is about getting things into practice in communities and at state level, for example, and then our national impact at precision medicine and programs around opioids and COVID-19. Next slide, please. Now, we've had a long track record of success, well before I was born almost, not quite, but nearly. In 1971, there was a general clinical research sponsored by the research center sponsored by the NIH here, which became the Irving Centers in the mid-1980s. And in 2006, with the launch of the CTSA program at the NIH, the Irving Institute, with endowment support from the Irving family, was founded. We were one of the foundational 12 institutions to have a CTSA, and we've been being incredibly successful across each cycle of the CTSA renewal over the past 15 to 16 years. That has been built on the shoulders of outstanding faculty and researchers and of my predecessors, particularly Henry Ginsberg, Melissa Begg, and Harold himself, of course. Next slide, please. So what are we made up of? What's our structure? And as Harold said, we have a U grant, which is an infrastructure and support grant, and we've our training grants of KL2 and TL1, and we've our leadership of those 3 grants, and we've an integration of those 3 grants. And then we stand up vertical programs, which we call resources, which are to meet the needs within certain domains for researchers on campus, including our core labs, which operate on PH10. In a cross-cutting horizontal manner, we have special initiatives, interdisciplinary initiatives, which cross all our resources, all the medical centers, and sometimes the whole university, NISP, and the hospital also, and into the region, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And we do this always and increasingly with partnership and collaborations and models of partnerships and collaborations that work depending on the situation. Next slide, please. So our leadership is presented here. Harold and I co-direct the overall U and the Institute, and Daichi Shimbo and Janine Genkinger are principal investigators of the KL2, and Daichi is our leader of all Transform educational and training programs, and you'll hear from him later. And then our newest leaders are Marissa Span and Jacqueline Taylor, who lead our TL1 training program, which is focused on precision medicine, a major theme for our CTSA and across the whole institution, as you know. Next slide, please. So what are our resources or our programs? And these are the vertical programs within domains to meet the needs at the local level and also bring expertise and knowledge from nationally. We call these resources because we see them as providing resources for our faculty and our researchers. We offer 70 different programs and services within these resources. This is where our 50 staff and 70 faculty are focused most of their energy. And this is how we operate our space for clinical research, community engagement, core labs, and the like. Now, what are these resources and programs? Well, we have 13 of them. And why do we have 13? Well, most of these are mandated by the NIH to be structured in a certain manner. And we have a couple of optional resources, which I'll talk about. But these include our translational therapeutics commercialization resource, our biostatistics and epidemiology support resources, biomedical informatics, our large clinical research support, physical space and research enterprise, our community engagement, physical space and activities and programs, education and training, special populations of rare disease, pediatric and elderly, and our network capacity to connect to the national programs, our large pilot studies programs, which partner with many people on campus to really provide a lot of seed funding, and then precision medicine, regulatory and ethical guidelines around clinical research, and our newest resource, our teams to incentivize and build diverse teams for the next generation of research. Now today, I'll talk a little bit about Accelerate, which is our commercialization program, which is really addressing that first big value that Harold talked about. We'll hear from Precision Medicine Resource from Wendy Chung. We'll hear from Daichi on transforming educational programs. As said, we have mandates to provide certain types of programs and resources. Our two optional programs are Precision Medicine and our T-Rex Accelerate commercialization program. We'll hear a bit more about those. Next slide, please. In addition to these verticals or programs that meet specific needs, we have the horizontals of interdisciplinary initiatives where we work across all our resources, but also the medical center and the whole campus, NYP and NISP also, to address major questions, which included, for example, the opioid crisis, COVID-19, and big themes like implementation science, learning health systems, and recruitment and retention. So these cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary programs, we launch about 1 or 2 a year, and these are major efforts on undertaking, and they go beyond our vertical programs. And in addition, we have committee structures internally to really address issues of immediate and changing needs, just to make sure we're engaging appropriately on campus to fully leverage our resources to do so. And these include our committees on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and COVID-19 clinical trials and clinical research, for example. Next slide, please. Now, working closely with the leadership of the medical center and also the university, we have a series of governances and advisory groups, and this is made up of an external advisory board, an internal advisory board. Both of these meet separately and annually. We also get a tremendous amount of feedback from our associate directors group and our senior leadership group, which engage all of our faculty leaders for our programs and our initiatives and our resources that I've described. Next slide, please. So pause for a second and just think about, well, how does this help me do my research? How does it help researchers on campus? So what do we do to help people, and how can we improve on this, and what are we doing as we go into the future? Next slide, please. We mentioned that we provide 70 services approximately across all our resources and programs, and some of them are listed here just to remind you of funding for pilot studies and research, support for collaborations and team science, support for community engagement, support for data and study design, biobanking, clinical trials, and access to large data. So we try to develop and align these according to the researcher's need, but also aware of how to connect them to the national network also. Next slide, please. So how have we done in this? How do we perform? What are we doing? What have we done, and what are we planning for the future? So over a 4-year period, as we're putting the grant in from 2016 to 2020, when we put the grant in, we had provided $4 million in pilot funding to over 100 teams with approximately a 10-fold return on investment in NIH funding, which is a significant impact and mirrors what we've done previous to that, over 10-fold return on investment for the previous 10 years. We touched on over 2,000 individuals in our training programs, career development programs over that time. We provided over 3,000 consultations in different areas of research design, clinical research, and biostatistics, ethics, and community engagement. Next slide, please. In addition, we engaged with over 40 community-based organizations working with the clinical trial office. There was a marked and massive growth in research volunteers in our recruitment registry for people to get involved in research. And through our opioid crisis response initiative, one of our cross-cutting initiative launched in 2018, we convened and seeded support that led to over $100 million in research funding for opioids. And we also supported and drove forward clinical trials using the national CTSA network for clinical trials called the TIN. Next slide, please. Here's one example of a program, a resource called Accelerate. This is to address the translational science gap to bridge the valley of death in therapeutic drug development. The activities it engages in are education, mentorship, funding to try and guide projects towards commercialization and patient benefit from discoveries. Who's involved with us? Our partners are Columbia Tech Ventures, a major partner across campus in this, and Biomedical Engineering, the Cancer Center, and the Business School also. Next slide, please. What have we done? In the last 4 years since this was launched, we've had 5 boot camps engaging over 200 individuals in training programs. We've awarded $1 million in pilot seed funding, which have led to the development of licensing in new companies. And we also have provided seed funding for early stage investigators to get to the next earliest step towards developing these ideas further. And we've had, at the other end of the spectrum, multiple investigators use our fast track first in human imaging pathway for early FDA approvals. So for example, we're very proud of the fact that our boot camp, as of the last year, is now fully integrated with engineering, the biomedics program, and ACT's Cancer Therapeutics program, as well as engaging the Puerto Rico Science, Technology and Research Trust and University of Puerto Rico to help them to develop their programs of commercialization and getting therapies to come to the market. We've had many successes on launching companies. One is shown here, a very innovative company, StableX Therapeutics, led by Henry Colcraft, which was started by our seed funding a few years ago. And we have a tremendously diverse steering committee, which is represented more by external entities, venture capital and CROs and pharma, rather than just internal entities. Next slide, please. In addition, here's an example of a cross-cutting initiative which really works across campus. And this was in response to the opioid crisis and the NIH call in 2017, early 2018, for us to respond to this national crisis. So we launched a landscape evaluation in December of 2018, gathered information what's going on campus, put together a seminar group and breakout sessions for forcing individuals who didn't know each other to work with each other on that day. And from there, we developed a steering committee, working groups, seed fundings, a large symposium, additional support and seed funding, which ultimately led to 21 investigators and 40 applications for research in this area. And for example, the Successful Healing Communities Award was awarded to Dr. El-Basal and her colleagues, Francis Levin and Ned Nunes. And ultimately, we published this process, and this whole program was eventually led to a new center at Columbia called the Chosen Center for Opioid and Addiction Research. This also illustrates the lifespan of landscape evaluation, launching, supporting, seeding, and then sustaining and spinning off one of these large initiatives, which is the purpose of these new initiatives over a several-year cycle. Next slide, please. So again, we're here for you. Our resources, we've given some examples of today, and our initiatives are here to support you. You'll find much more information about these on our website. Let's talk a little bit about what we're doing and how we're doing for the next few years. Next slide, please. So key service areas that we have and we continue to really develop further are funding programs. We have 9 unique pilot award programs. We have our Irving Scholarships Endowed Professor programs. We have support for data and study design as well as data sciences and are expanding those. And of course, many people use our inpatient and outpatient clinical research or community-based clinical research programs and our core labs, including our expanding omics programs and our biobanking programs. And then our transform career development programs we'll hear extensively about from Daichi. Next slide, please. So what have we already done as part of the new cycle? In the last year, we've launched a new program in learning health systems with clinical care, bringing innovation and scientific process to improving quality and outcomes within a health system, working with the hospital and the FPO, the engineering school, the business school, and many partners across campus. We've launched a community ambassador program to bi-directionally engage and support financially leaders from community to be involved in our programs and to guide us in how to best do community engaged, community participatory research. With the Mailman School, we've launched our exposomics initiative with Gary Miller at the lead, and we've developed the core labs and the mass spectrometry cores for this purpose. And with Sandra Lee, we've just launched our new team science programs, particularly focused on diversity in team science at Columbia. Next slide, please. In addition, we're establishing, as we move into the next year, our research navigation program, which will have both online as well as direct personal contact and navigator system for our researchers to access our services. We're complicated. We've got a lot of acronyms. It's difficult to understand what's going on. So besides our website, we're establishing a research navigation system so people, particularly new investigators, can access them more easily and be facilitated. We're expanding our data services to a data concierge type model, which not just addresses biostatistics, but addresses data sciences and systems biology in a single consultative session as needed. And we're also launching and expanding clinical and participant recruitment and retention services, especially around the themes of diversity and underrepresented populations. Finally, I'll mention our large-scale biobanking initiatives that's really exploded during COVID last year, but were launched just before that, and the development of genomic and data warehouses. And I'm particularly proud of our receipt of a new NIH award, a CO6 construction grant, and this will help us to invest $10 million in building a university state-of-the-art facility for biorepository and biobanking. And with that, I'll move to the next session, which is on precision medicine, because the home of our biobanking and within our resources is within the precision medicine resource. Next slide, please. And Wendy Chung will present on behalf of our precision medicine resource and team. Can you please start the video? And here we go.
Hi, my name's Wendy Chung. I'm a co-director of the Precision Medicine Resource within the CTSA. Represented here are the other members of our team, and I'm going to briefly run through what we can do in the Precision Medicine Resource to make your research and your training more effective. Shown here is a schema of how we're set up to be able to do that. I think of us in some ways as a convening authority in terms of being able to bring together diverse individuals, investigators, trainees, and other partners, importantly funders, such as members of industry, as well as individuals from the community, of course, for whom we're doing all of this work. I also think of the other end in terms of, as we think about what we've learned, being able to, in an iterative way, get that back out to those individuals that came in at the beginning and take that information back out, especially to the community in terms of what we've learned. So being able to disseminate this information and the methods that we've developed. How do we do this? Well, in the middle, one important thing is funding. So being able to get funds to be able to do that research, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Importantly, we also have educational opportunities, informal coursework, as well as seminar series. We have resources in terms of infrastructure. I'll talk specifically about the biobank. And then finally, being able to work with other cores within the CTSA, other resources, to be able to think about how you do this, for instance, in terms of clinical trial design, rare disease communities, and other things that go to make all of these pieces fit together. So let me give you some examples of what we've done before. We've given, as I said, funds for pilot programs. Those have actually been extremely successful. So we think of this as seed money in terms of being able to do pilot studies, proof of principle, to be able to go on to get additional funding from other funders, namely NIH or other federal funding sources. And in fact, with that, you can see that we've been quite successful with that funding. We also, in terms of dissemination, think it's really important to be able to, as I said, get this learning out very broadly. I'm really proud of a series that we have. If you haven't seen it, it's in the Annals of Internal Medicine. It's now actually even larger than this. It's a multi-part series on precision medicine that's been very, very widely taken up by the especially clinical community in terms of thinking about precision medicine and clinical practice. We also have an annual course that I'm the director of that works for our graduate students, our fellows, even junior faculty member, as well as medical students on precision medicine. That's extremely successful. And again, many faculty member that are showing current updates in multiple dimensions of how that works. We also have an NIH-funded eMERGE study that helps us think about clinical implementation and taking the cutting edge of this genomic medicine and how we use it in clinical practice, specifically within the context of the electronic medical record with that implementation device. And finally, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but we've started the Columbia Biobank, and especially within the setting of COVID, ramps that up significantly. So on that note, again, with COVID, really, we had already set up the infrastructure for the Columbia University Biobank, but with SARS-CoV-2 last year, really went into high gear in terms of making that a resource that was available to the community and very widely taken up in terms of, especially, as I said, COVID-related studies. We continue that onward, and of course, not related only to COVID, but as a lasting infrastructure that is openly, freely available to members of the community. And again, you can go to the website to be able to find out more about that, multiple biospecimens, as well as linking that to electronic medical record data so that that can be used, whether it's for genomic studies, metabolites, and again, that can be very widely in terms of either people with or without infection with COVID, children or adults, very wide in terms of uptake, and we'll continue doing that actually on a much larger scale, so stay tuned for that. In addition, Gary Miller leads our exposomics service. If you don't know about this, Gary will be having a boot camp this summer in July 2022. It's really an incredible platform for untargeted metabolomic profiling using Orbitrap-based ultra high resolution LC-GC-MS to be able to see metabolites, things that are in the environment, to be able to think about other dimensions of exposures. And again, ginormous amount of data that comes out of that. Of course, one of the things Gary will be talking about in the course is how you actually analyze all of that data. A resource here, and importantly, again, pilot projects will be launched in early 2022. And if you have further questions about that, reach out directly to Gary. As I said, we have educational seminars in addition to the course that I had talked about. We have a precision medicine seminar series that includes about 8 lectures during the course of the year, international highly acclaimed speakers, as well as local talent for you to get to be able to know the precision medicine landscape. We have a half day usually, or a full day, depending on the agenda, for our symposium that features many of our pilot awardees, and to be able to say what they've been doing, as well as I said, other support includes that pilot program that I described. Importantly, this date is coming up, so I call your attention to this. December 3rd will be the pilot awards for the precision medicine program. So finally, in terms of any questions that you might have about anything you've heard today, feel free to reach out to any of the members of our team, especially you can look at this general email address here in terms of any resources through Precision Medicine. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. That was wonderful. An outstanding program across the whole of the campus and nationally. I'd like to introduce Daichi Shimbo, who's PI of the KL2, Director of Transform, all our educational mentoring programs, and also Associate Dean for Research Career Development on campus. Daichi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Murdoch. So my job in the next 5 minutes is take you through the workforce development. And I'm going to tell you about the KL2 program as well as the TL1 program, which really are the tentpole programs under what we call the Transform resource. Next slide, please. So what does Transform stand for? Well, it stands for Training and Nurturing Scholars for Research that is Multidisciplinary. What's shown here is our conceptual model of how we think Transform will help all of you. For those who are scholars, those who are obviously budding scientists from early career to mid-career, as well as allied research personnel. And so the purpose of the Transform programs is to actually provide research skills, i.e. expertise in content areas, to provide new research skills such as biostats or epidemiology or translational research methods, collaboration, and most importantly, we want to actually teach people how to lead research teams. Now, what our outcomes are that we want the scholars and allied research personnel to conduct and disseminate very important and innovative research, ultimately that impacts health in a positive way. And I mentioned leadership, but we want people to, when they're trained by our Transform programs, to be a leader in interdisciplinary team science research. And then as I personally think about research career development, I think it's circular, like life. And in fact, we want to actually train early stage investigators to become mid-career and then senior, and then subsequently train the next generation of scholars. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief overview of our programs. I don't have enough time in 5 minutes to go through these, but I will go through them in a general sense. So we train everyone from undergraduates all the way up to junior faculty as well as mid-career. You can see under the undergraduate category, we have a program called BEST, which is Biostatistics Epidemiology Summer Training. It's a summer training program that's now more than 10 years old. It's focused on underrepresented persons from universities and expose students to epidemiology and biostats because we want them to be exposed and then prepare for a career in the biomedical sciences. We have a traditional TL1 program. It's similar to a T32. And it's a 2-year program that enrolls pre and postdocs to sort of integrate with what Dr. Chung said. Our TL1 program actually is focused on precision medicine. And we have a broad definition of what precision medicine here is in the Irving Institute. And we've had a number of successful scholars actually come through our program. For both postdocs and junior faculty, we have the Columbia Summer Research Institute. This is a boot camp that was now, it's in its 13th year. It was designed by Dr. Lee Goldman, who actually now joined us as a faculty in teaching. He originally designed this program. It's based on the Harvard boot camp for research. And this is a program that actually gives people foundational knowledge and skills to actually conduct clinical and translational science. So you learn about biostats, epidemiology, race and health, learn how to write grants, and actually you know how to actually disseminate your science. Now that's 10 credits. If you're interested in the full master's, we have the Master's in Patient-Oriented Research, which is a 2-year commitment. And it's a total of 30 credits through Mailman. And the Columbia Summer Research Institute is merely the first 10 credits, and then you can go on to get the full master's if that's what you want. For junior faculty, at the assistant professor level, we have an institutional KL2 program, which I'll go into a little bit more. And this is a 2-year program that helps assistant professors actually reach independence. And then we have a Reach for the First R01 program, which is very popular, which helps assistant professors and other faculty prepare for their first grant. And like I said, it's been wildly successful and wildly popular. And then those who are sort of leaving the early career stage, who are now mid-career, there's an early Irving Scholars Award program. It's really a research distinction award for the best junior faculty here at Columbia. And it's been a pleasure for me to actually run this program with Murdoch. We basically see the best of the best at the Columbia Irving Medical Center, and then a chosen few is selected for this award. Next slide, please. This is our leadership and administration. Obviously, I'm Daichi Shimba. I'm the director of Transform. And I'm also or multi-PI of the KL2 program along with Janine Geckinger. We have 2 new directors, Marissa Spam and Jacqueline Taylor, very accomplished in their own research disciplines, who now are multi-PIs of the TL1 program. And just a shout out to Henry Ginsberg, who obviously is Director Emeritus of the Irving Institute, and he just stepped down as the past TL1 PI, but remains on the Transform program leadership. And then we have Harley Lynch, a very experienced senior program manager who runs all of our programs. Again, I don't have enough time to actually go through all the wonderful faculty which are listed here, as well as the other members of our team that support all of our programs in Transform. Next slide, please. We've been very busy. This is just simple highlights. There are many more from our last funding period, which ended in 2020. Again, multiple programs across resources. This is not just our resource, but they do span 6 resources altogether. We've trained almost 1,800 allied research personnel. We have 280 participants in the Transform programs, such as the TL1, CSRI, the Master's program, KL2, Reach for the First R01, and Irving Scholars program. So these are very busy and active programs. And you can see that here are some of our outcomes for the TL1 and KL2. The ones I want to highlight is of the KL2 scholars that we've trained, 28 of them, 100% remain in research and produced 371 publications. And I'm happy to report 80% have gone on to get an independent grant defined as a K, an R01, or other foundation grant. So very successful program for this last funding period. Next slide, please. Just a brief overview of our aims for our current grant period, which we just entered. Obviously, we want to continue our current programs, but we're very much interested in developing new programs for clinical and non-clinician scientists and allied research personnel. And obviously, just paraphrasing here, we want them to be successful in their careers and ultimately helping patients and communities. Next slide, please. Along with the theme of demonstrating, obviously, we not only want to develop, but we want to show people that we've been successful. And we've developed really a comprehensive and systemic evaluation program, and just making sure that we continuously identify issues and actually improve upon them. And ultimately, we do want to show that we've been successful. Next slide, please. And then finally, because we don't operate in a vacuum, we're very much interested in disseminating all of our innovative programs actually within Columbia, across campus, and of course, to our local, regional, and national partners. Next slide, please. I don't have time to go through all of these. I'm just going to pick out a few things. We have lots of things that we're proposing in the renewal. So we're broad and also we're deep. And so you can see here, we have new workforce training. We're expanding our current programs to focus on community-based participatory research and dissemination and implementation research. And we have a renewed focus on interdisciplinary and team science. We have a lot of new collaborators here at Columbia as well, outside of the institution. We have other approaches that we're very much interested. I might be biased, but I'm very much interested in the group peer mentoring program. We have a very successful Aspire 1 and Aspire 2. These are group peers of women scientists, many of whom are underrepresented persons. These are rising stars at Columbia, and they're really focused on mentoring one another, and we well support them in their endeavor. And then you can see here on the right, we have a whole bunch of dissemination plans. Ones that I want to highlight is that we're now working with Pittsburgh. They have this customized online IDP, and we're actually testing that in a randomized controlled trial. We hope to disseminate that more broadly at Columbia. And then we have a team science focus of actually evaluating how good are we and actually developing team science and leadership skills. Next slide, please. So I just want to go back to it, who we are. If you are a scholar, budding scholar, or someone who is an allied research personnel, Transform is here to help you. You can see that we're doing a lot, and ultimately we have been successful, and we're pretty confident in the current grant period. We will continue to be successful, and we have a lot of resources to support your interest to become successful in your chosen careers. Next slide, please. This is a shout out of a Transform exemplar. Dr. Gisette Reyes-Sofer is a dear friend who's in BPNS in the Department of Medicine. She actually benefited very widely from our career development program. She was a CALE2 scholar. She was an Aspire member. Remember, I just told you that group peer mentoring program of successful women scientists, and also reached for the first R01. It's very important to note that she's used multiple resources. As Murdoch has said, there's 13 resources here at Columbia. She's used the Miles Barker's Core Lab and the CRR and his other resources, and she's had much access to other funding here within the Irving Institute. So I just want to close there. Thank you so much for allowing me to tell you about all the Transform programs. Next slide, please. Okay, next is a video from the Community Engagement Core resource, and you'll hear lots about this very important resource and then what they're doing in the new grant period. Thank you so much.
The Columbia Community Partnership for Health, or CCPH, is our off-campus home in Washington Heights across the George Washington region. CCPH is a unique multi-purpose space for Columbia University researchers to conduct health research, health promotion activities, and research education. We also connect local residents to health and social services, offer health lectures and blood pressure screening, operate a bilingual health library, and facilitate access to health research participation at Columbia. Columbia Community Partnership for Health is key to our mission of fostering community engagement in translational research at Columbia.
The Wellness Center is a hub for health in West Harlem by providing health resources to area residents. Within the Wellness Center, I run the Community Health Worker Stroke Prevention Program that gives local residents the tools they need to address stroke as health advocates in their communities and at faith-based organizations.
The Wellness Center is also a home base for Mental Health First Aid, a program dedicated to improving access to quality mental health services in Upper Manhattan for African American and Latinx community members. Community leaders are trained to combat the stigma often associated with mental health challenges and help others seek mental health and medical care.
Dissemination and implementation research is the scientific study of the methods, frameworks, and strategies to actively promote the adoption and integration of evidence-based treatments, programs, and policies into routine use across diverse real-world settings and populations. The Implementation Science Initiative provides training and symposia, consultation services, pilot funding, seminars, and work groups to help build research capacity and connections in implementation science.
We provide consultations on study recruitment plans, as well as provide assistance with research study promotion and recruitment, all with the goal of facilitating diverse and inclusive participation in research.
Seeker is home to our community-based participatory research scholars and awards program, a training and funding opportunity for Columbia faculty to develop academic community research partnerships. We have awarded over $500,000 in pilot grants to support research of priority to our local community.
I wanted to applaud and thank our Daiichi and the Transform program and our community engagement core resource leaders. I think this speaks to a theme which is evident from our resources and programs, that these are partnerships that are broad and deep across campus and interdisciplinary in nature. And our focus in the next several years is to continue in that interdisciplinary partnership manner to expand our programs and have deeper impact. In particular, we have built success over 15 years of the CTSA at Columbia on the shoulders of the outstanding faculty and researchers across multiple domains, the Medical Center, NYP, NISP, and the whole of the university and our regional partners. In particular, in the last 5 years, we've built increasing amounts of partnerships at campus to achieve our goals. And shown on the left in the green boxes are many of those that have been established in the last 5 years and exist and are currently in place and will be expanded. We plan in the next 5-year cycle to develop and refine and expand partnerships with multiple additional entities on campus, and particularly going deeper and broader in some themes with the schools of engineering, business school and law school, the new climate school, the faculty practice organization, the hospital, and with industry partners. So it is through this interdisciplinary process with partners that we achieve our goals. And those goals are to try and serve you, the researchers on campus, bring the best resources possible from our local activities, our national activities, and disseminate our science nationally and our best practices nationally also. So I want to thank all our partners and ask you, next slide please, in our partnerships and in our programs, how can we help and support your research? Please engage with us, let us know. Next slide, please. There's a number of ways that you can do this. You can visit our website and you can look at our resources and services. I want to point out that this lecture, this town hall is recorded and will be available on the website, as are all of the descriptions of our resources, programs, initiatives, and services. I'd like to also ask you, implore you, and beg you to join and subscribe to our mailing list. This is how we get to you, and this is how you can get to us. And if you join our mailing list, we can really regularly share our newsletters and information on services, resources, pilot awards, funding opportunities, training, etc. You can email us at any time, and please feel free to email me directly about any particular questions. And we have a series of town halls which will continue over the next several years at the smaller scale and larger scale to address the initiatives and continue to grow our next 5-year cycle of research support on campus. Please do email us with questions and any feedback that you have. And the time is late in the hour, so I won't open up to any questions that were posed. But if you have any questions and follow-up, please email us those questions. We will be making any questions and the answers to those questions available on the websites. We'll be making this recording available also. I want to thank all of my partners, all of our faculty, all of our staff, all of our teams, all of our collaborators on campus who have supported us in the last 5 years so that we could support us, ourselves, we can support each other, we can support you in your research mission. And please stay tuned for our CTSA Town Hall series, which will be starting in 2022 and be our Town Hall series, which will continue to announce and disseminate programs and opportunities. Thank you.